Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you from a beautiful day after the torrential rains yesterday in Accra, Ghana. And my guest comes from another life of sunny life that I lived. And I'm really excited to host him. He is a digital media innovator with over 25 years of experience who has been active in the NFT space since 2017 and is a thought leader in defining hashtag Media 3 as the intersection between Web3 and media and entertainment. He is an executive producer of I'm Here Now, a documentary film chronicling over 90 key artists and personalities in the NFT space. While at Sony Pictures Entertainment, he filed 3 patents related to blockchain and NFT technologies, after which he worked in emerging experiences and product content innovation at Netflix, where his projects included Love, Death, and Robots, and Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, as well as the new Netflix Games Platform Initiative, all while maintaining a focus on how to discover and promote franchise IP on the service. So I'm really curious about that. In 2021, he left Netflix to join the Web3 space full-time and is an advisor to multiple Web3 companies, including Doodles, National Lampoon, and NFT42. He created MeebitsDAO and helped to launch a number of successful NFT projects like Savage Droids, Beauties, Super Geisha, and Lobby 3. As a generative artist with multiple art drops and collaborations on art blocks, his first art blocks collection went for auction at Sotheby's. He founded the artist incubator Matter.art, which helps accelerate careers of artists around the world, showcasing up-and-coming artists from diverse communities, and is host to collaborative, experimental, and generative art collections. Kaigani Turner.
Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Yay, I'm so excited. So let's jump right in.
Sure.
Where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
Sure. So I'm from New York originally. That was a long time ago. So by way of Britain, which I lived in for 17 years after where we first met at Stanford. And now I'm currently back in California, residing in, was in LA, and now I'm in Lake Arrowhead, which is in the mountains outside of LA.
Oh,
and
lovely.
And what is my craft? My craft, that's kind of tricky to put I guess the intersection of media and technology is the best way to describe it. And if there's a craft around, the pursuit of innovation and art, that's somewhere in there. So
okay.
Yeah, I mean, but I would say the majority of my career has been as a designer and as a technologist.
Okay. Yes. And I remember we were both in the School of Engineering.
Yeah. So I got my degree in computer science.
Yes.
But didn't spend much time programming.
Right. Okay. So I'm curious, why the where? So how did you come back to California? And I'm even more curious, how did you end up in the UK?
So I was working with a design consultancy called Studio Archetype, which merged with a technology developer called Sapient, and Sapient has gone through a few forms and still exists today. But I originally just had the opportunity to do a project in London for what was going to be a 3-month project, and I hadn't been out of the US before that, but like the week before this opportunity came along, I just took a vacation and went to France, and just thought, in the same way that going from New York to California was a big change in perspectives and seeing different things and meeting different people and seeing different lifestyles. I felt that happened again when I went to Europe, and I just it always gets you to look at where you're from, where your hometown is, or kind of everything you take for granted and the context around you through a new lens. So, suddenly it wasn't, in the same way that I was a New Yorker in California, and now I was an American in Europe, and saw things that I took for granted. Suddenly you're re-examining, or you're seeing through different perspectives. So I really, in terms of personal growth, I like that. As a designer, I felt that when I got to London, I suddenly got an appreciation for design that I didn't really have before. Because prior to when I was making a decision to go to university, I thought about going places like RISD, the design school. But at the time, I didn't really have a clear understanding of design versus fine art and illustration. And I felt like in London, it was just such design is so much a part of the culture. And there's so many great designers that have come out of London and the UK, that I would go to places like the Design Museum, and there was just an appreciation for an aesthetic in design that I really gravitated towards, and felt like that was really enriching, and I could talk to all these great designers around me. So that's kind of what pulled me in. And then I think generally I thought I was going to move back to New York because I missed a kind of big cosmopolitan sort of city and lifestyle. But I found a lot of that in London, and I found a lot of, I was getting into Europe a lot. So there was just a lot of personal growth in the beginning. And like I said, an appreciation for design and culture. And then over time, my professional network and my friends and that kind of took hold. So after I'd been there for a few years, I found that I was finding great opportunities there, and there was no incentive to move back. But eventually I settled down, met my eventual wife, and we were just, I think what we weren't really looking for in London, we were looking to move outside of London, looking for kind of better weather. And eventually, there's no better weather, we realized, than going back to the States. So I think that's what, I was surprised, because I always thought I'd miss New York, but it wasn't until I hadn't been back to California in like 12 or 13 years. And then I went back for a conference, and I was surprised how much I missed California. And independently, she had visited LA to visit a friend, and we both realized that we just would prefer living in LA for the weather, and for the also opportunity around media and entertainment.
Right, of course.
It's much better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, very interesting. So LA was just a nice difference. Now, did this coincide with your leaving Netflix?
No, when I was still in London, I was more fully in the design innovation space. So I was working for a company called Moo, that you might know for, they print business cards, among other things. But I was heading up their innovation group that was looking at physical to digital experiences. So we were basically printing chips in business cards and paper, and seeing what we could do with that. So I was coming up with all these ideas around what you could do with tokenized digital experiences, which kind of primed me to pay attention to NFTs when that came along. But I was more fully, and prior to that, I was in games and educational games and kids games. So I kind of moved through a variety of different areas. But I was when I was working on children's games, I was working with the BBC, and we got the global rights to their kids franchises. So they have a CBeebies brand that's all their kids animation shows. So we got the rights to do games with that. So that kind of got me interested in doing more in media. And I really found that was the most exciting aspect of my work, rather than, prior to that, I'd been doing a lot of maybe more corporate design work or commercial website design, and thinking about consumer projects and working with big brands. But I found like the media really appealed to my creativity at the point that, I was moving at the phase of life I was moving into. So that when I came back to the States, I wanted to go fully into looking at the media side of things. So that's when I came to LA, I worked for Sony initially. And then after that, I worked for Netflix.
Oh, okay. So you've been in the LA entertainment scene for a bit.
Yeah. So when I moved to LA, that was fully into working for the entertainment industry.
Okay, interesting. So in terms of design, have you always been an artist? Like, when did you discover the artist in yourself?
Yeah, I've always, I still don't think I hold a pen and pencil correctly, because I was holding it from such a young age that I just kind of developed this way of holding it. So I was drawing as soon as I could really pick up a pen and paper. So I was always, had that aspect. And then I don't know if you remember from Stanford, but I was doing lots of different posters, and so it was always like a side side thing, but I never. My parents are artists. My parents are in the theater. My mother's a playwright, and my dad's an actor director. So I kind of took a orthogonal. I kind of took a beeline away from the arts because of that. I knew just how difficult it is to make a living in the arts. But design was eventually. I got my CS degree. I realized I didn't want to do any coding, but found a kind of middle ground of sort of user experience, what would evolve into user experience design, as it built on my technology background, but it was also more creative and thinking about the systems design and these sorts of things. So I kind of gravitated back towards my passion for the arts, the visual arts, through design, and approaching it through design was a way that I felt like that kind of, like I said, before I came to London, I didn't know that. I thought if you want to pursue your interest in the creative arts, then you have to become an illustrator. And what does that mean? And I didn't want to be an illustrator, but design showed me like a professional path where you can think about business problems and you can bring your creativity to it. So design was like a nice, happy balance between the two of my interest in technology and innovation and creativity.
Okay. So before we get too much into like the wonderful juicy things you're doing now, I want to ask you about Glocal Speak because, talking about London, talking about LA, we want to hear what you hear. So I ask you to share a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience and how or why you came to value it as Glocal Speak.
There are, so first of all, I'm trying to pick which local to choose from. But I know I'm trying to think of, because I know there are some sort of British language things that had crossed over to the States that I didn't remember before I went to Britain. I think they were new. They sort of crossed over in the time I was away, and I was surprised to hear people saying them when I got back to the States. And one of those would kind of be maybe. I'll choose. I'll say. I mean, I'm sure this existed, but I think this is ridiculous. But I'll say bespoke. Bespoke, I'll say because I think that was interesting to me as a term for kind of the craft, and I hadn't heard that term until I went to Britain, and then I think I noticed it more when I came back. So people were probably saying it, but it's one of those things that when you travel, you suddenly your ears perk up for things that maybe would have just washed over you before. So because it was used so much for sort of common language in Britain, it's sort of a thing that I really like to think about and to say, just as a way of thinking about something that's made to order and crafted especially and tailored especially for an individual person. So it's a nice way of looking at art and design, I think.
Okay. So speaking locally now, back to where you are and getting into the Web3 side of things. So I'm just really curious. Everything that you've been doing is very innovation focused. So really looking at what's next, what's new. I remember watching when Twitter first came out, you were like on Twitter, and I still can't with Twitter. It's too much. But you've always been kind of at the front edge of what's going on. So now as you're in this space, creating DAOs, how did you find yourself in that space, and how do you now find yourself in that space?
Yeah, so it was something that came out of it was a progression of what I was looking at in my time at Moo, where I was thinking about you can take digital experiences and make them tied to something tokenized. Originally, I was thinking in a physical form, like a card or a chip, and I was thinking about what does that unlock in the digital space. So when I heard about, in 2017, I heard about just a project called CryptoKitties, which was, sounded silly, but it kind of broke through a little bit to mainstream. And I was there really early, sort of looking at that. And I kind of got it right away beyond the kind of surface, the art of the, cartoon cats. I got that this is about digital ownership, and that, I better understood the blockchain, and I've been following crypto a little bit, and understood that this is really transformative in terms of like now everything that exists in our digital life can be made more real, made more tangible in a virtual sense through this technology. So that's what really piqued my interest. And then from there, I went pretty heavily, into pursuing that while I was at Sony. It was adjacent to what I was doing, for my main job, which was in the video on demand platform. But I kind of pushed a few projects there, and then when that market cycle crashed, I just, all the potential sponsors and stakeholders just sort of went cold. So I found that frustrating, but I was like, well, we're not ready yet. And on my time horizon, I thought we needed another. I really thought it was going to sort of come back around now-ish. I gave it about 5 years from then, but I was surprised in 2021 when suddenly it sort of, had this. I think it was overhyped. Unfortunately, I think that kind of to its detriment in the long run. But that sort of brought it back around to the point where I was doing generative art and saw an amazing reception for that. So that was sort of the first key point. So my first sense of, where the public excitement was happening was around art blocks and just seeing the reception to that. Originally, it was just, me. I mean, out of 2019, I was, a lot of us in the space were just having fun and experimenting. So I was surprised to see just the reception that my generative art on art blocks got. And that was sort of the first proof point. And then I watched as literally in the span of a month, I was giving a presentation on NFTs at Netflix. And originally I was going to present, half of it was just going to be explaining what NFTs are. And over that period of time, I realized that everyone already knows what NFTs are. So it had broken through the mainstream to the point that I didn't have to explain it. I could just jump straight in and talk about the implications of, where I thought it was going. So that all happened very quickly. And then by the end of 2021, I realized that then was the time to jump in fully and really try to do something in the market rather than wait any longer. It seemed like good timing just to do what I wanted to do with a blockchain lab, and I had a couple of partners that had venture funding, invited me to join them. So it just was sort of a now or never kind of situation at the time.
Nice. So you mentioned the CryptoKitties. And so I read somewhere that you broke the genome, or you broke it. So what does that mean?
So CryptoKitties were or are interesting because they basically are bred on the blockchain, and they have a digital DNA that determines what traits their offspring will have. That had all been because of the nature of the blockchain. It's like you do all this, all your code is pretty much set up front and doesn't change. So whatever they had to put into the DNA to use, even through now for it to continue to generate these traits was all that was already in their code. So people were trying to figure out, that you could find the DNA, and there was sort of this long number, hexadecimal number for representing the DNA. People had sort of found certain things out about them that if you do, this one seems to be related to the types of eyes they have, or this one seems to be related to the, this trait, their sort of pattern, but no one had really figured it out completely. So it started, I actually just had the flu, and I was just getting obsessed with like, how did they actually do this? So I was curious how they did this. And I think because of my computer science background, it's actually a theme that's continued on through my art, just being obsessed with, it goes further than my computer science background. It goes back to the fact that being the age that we are, I was there in the early days of computing. So it's like, I did things where you had to get down to the bit level, machine language level programming. So I had a certain perspective that I was able to look at just the bits of what was going on in these numbers, and eventually was able to find the pattern in what they were doing that was kind of unconventional, that made was kind of throwing some people off. And from there, it could really just break down the rest of the code. So by publishing the code and showing, what was what, that really was embraced by the community, because that helped them with their breeding from then on. They knew like what they needed to do. Even though there's some amount of probabilities, they still knew like, if you do this enough, if you breed these two cats together enough, the odds are you'll get this outcome. So you at least knew what you needed to do. So it kind of set the blueprint for a lot of people to follow and to really, make the most of, if they, for the time that people were obsessing about breeding different types of cats. They took to it.
So is that kind of like in the gaming mindset that really kind of helped you to move through that as well? And were you in the gaming place when that was taking place?
Yeah, I mean, I was interested in how its implications for games. I still think gaming is a huge aspect of the potential for Web3 because you see, whether it's Fortnite or any of the other popular games out there, a lot of what the income is, the revenue is around the in-game items and accessories and different ways of customizing and whether it's just cosmetic or not. All these items are the basis of the game economy. So the fact that you can unlock that from the game itself, and I mean what people are already doing, but they're usually doing in-game, or even they might be using eBay or something to like sell their game items, even though it's not, it's sort of like a trust on a trust basis. You could just make that, you could make all these in-game items a real thing. So I think I kind of saw that. I kind of saw, I thought it was exciting that, if you think about what CryptoKitties was doing with breeding and, that you could have items that change and have this sort of internal logic to them and evolve. Yeah, it just seems like it's still a wide open space for people to figure out what that enables you to do. But I think the key thing is like, it unlocks it from a given platform. And what was also exciting about CryptoKitties is like the company behind CryptoKitties, Dapper, which still exists, they could go away and you can still be able to breed cats on the blockchain. So it's like that piece of it is, as long as that particular Ethereum blockchain exists, you can continue to use it in that way. So I thought that was also pretty exciting. And the fact that you have this platform that, it kind of runs in parallel to the internet and being able to define these digital objects that should persist to, as long as people are around to use them.
Okay. So let's talk metaverse a little bit. So as you're an entrepreneur now in this space, and in my mind, I'm thinking that the things that you're doing are kind of setting up the stage for metaverse living and metaverse economic activity. So Matter. Let's talk first about Matter. So especially because of the global aspects of like looking at how you're doing that. So how did Matter evolve out of the works that are kind of a side by side and out of before it?
Yeah. So Matter came out of my, going back to what I was doing with art blocks and trying to blend that with kind of where I saw things going. And one of the things I found with my own art was that I was most excited by collaborations with other artists, is just how that, pushed me to do different things and I got to see their process. So when I was thinking about something to build out of the blockchain lab, as we were trying to really get focused on, what moving into 2022, like what did we want to sort of build and kind of have products coming out. Matter was blending all those interests together, and I wanted to create something for artists where they could take advantage of the new technology, the new emerging technology like Web3, and have a platform for their art and to explore this new space together through various collaborative works. So it got started as we were doing NFT drops with collaborative artists and helping them work together. Then moving into that summer, we kind of spun it up fully as its own project and business, and I kind of took the helm of it. And I brought on a team that broadened our mission even more, and we got a better focus on what we're doing as, to support the artists. And that summer, because we kind of moved away from this idea that we're just going to do NFT drops, we wanted to do artist grants because we also knew the state of the, we were going into the recession and the market downturn. So we realized that, a lot of artists had embraced Web3 prior to that, and then were finding themselves in this down market. So we wanted to give out some grants to see if we could bridge the summer and to continue to highlight the artists. And that's kind of, to some extent, remained our focus in the short term, is to spotlight different artists and to, shine a light on their work. And then we're going to continue to, the next phase is to connect artists to their fans and supporters in a way to help them promote their art and get their art known in the world. So it's taking advantage of, what's this current media ecosystem that we live in, where everyone's doing Instagrams and TikToks and YouTube Shorts, and helping them really, those platforms individually aren't great for necessarily discovering, for fans of creators to discover their work. It's sort of, if you know someone and you can follow and subscribe them, but it's hard for you to sort of have a, if you're specifically interested in finding creators and artists, it's hard to kind of navigate. I mean, I've tried myself. I want to follow lots of folks I'm trying to learn more about TikTok, and I'm trying to follow artists and creators on TikTok, and I just don't. You can sort of follow hashtags, but it's just such a, it's difficult to just find what you're interested in. So we think, maybe helping to create a kind of channel in a sense of, where it's curated by us. It's sort of our lens on the creators that are in our network. We think that'll be beneficial to, the collectors and the supporters as well as the artists.
So are you finding a good amount of intersection? I mean, like, your NFT was auctioned at Sotheby, so that's like traditional art spaces versus, I guess the Web3. So where the world of crypto lives. Are you finding that people are versed in both enough, especially in the art space, to kind of understand? Because when NFTs came out, I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it's speculative, right? It's like people are just kind of vacuuming up things because they want things, as opposed to, really understanding and connecting with the artist. It's just kind of like what social media is. It's like influencers, that kind of thing. So it sounds like you're trying to kind of peel back the fluff to get into the scene that the Pablo Picassos and that kind of nostalgic art scene was about.
Yeah, and that was also kind of the focus of, I felt like everyone in the market was looking at the artifact, was looking at the art as it appeared on, whatever marketplace, but it was very hard to find any kind of information about the artists themselves. And I thought about the traditional art world, and the traditional art world is all about the artists who have built their narrative, and you learn about the artists probably, almost before in tandem with seeing their art. And just seeing, a painting doesn't necessarily tell you, you want to know the motivation, you want to know their influences, their what inspired them to make the painting, and then those are just extra layers of context that really bring the painting to life, rather than just seeing the painting. I mean, it's sort of like the equivalent of, and then how it's being presented as well. Like, you'll see it in a gallery, you'll see it in a showroom, or in a museum. But the way that NFTs are presented, it's like, going to seeing it in Walmart, or seeing it in like some kind of bargain bin. So there's that issue too. So that's why I thought, we want to focus on the artists, and that's where, I think on a long enough timeline, all art is going to have some kind of digital tokenized aspect. I mean, you see Damien Hirst is kind of pushing forward with a lot of experimentation around there. But I think you could imagine, long before this, I was consulting on a project where people wanted to build a web app for high net worth individuals that have collections, and their whole thesis was that people have access to people have these collections that are in vaults, and they might just want to be able to see that on their phone. And basically what they're describing was NFTs. You could own a Picasso and you could give it to a museum, but you could still have a token that says, yeah, I own this. I don't need this. I don't need to have it in my house, but I know that I own it. It's like that. That's sort of what NFTs will bring. So I think whether it's physical or digital, I think all art will be tokenized. So we're at the early, what I found exciting about the Web3 space is that suddenly we're in a place where, it's broken apart the kind of gatekeeping of the traditional art world, where, if you look just within the Matter community, like we have a strong presence, we have a number of African artists and Nigerian women and lots of different folks that we were able to highlight, who wouldn't have an on-ramp into a traditional art world of if it's Sotheby's or whomever
Christie's,
you think about, Christie's,
I mean, the galleries.
Galleries in New York, London. So that seems like the opportunity, and I think but at the same time, it's also it's a fleeting opportunity. So I'm also very aware that if people don't take advantage of the changes and the innovations, that will just sort of return to the status quo as before, as the existing institutions do ramp up on the technology. So I see it as we're in a weird place of like, we kind of need to stay focused on the next 10 to 15 years. But for an artist, they're thinking about, the next month's, bills and these sorts of things. So it's like how to balance these two things and get people on board with the change that's coming so that they can really be in position to reap the benefits.
So the grants that you give, are they cash or are they tokens?
They're cash in a sense that they're crypto, but they're they're stable coins. So they're not speculative crypto.
Okay. So they can convert that into
they can convert that into cash. Yeah. So it's not gonna be like variable over time.
Right. Yeah.
So. Yeah. But so we those are helpful. But I think further along, it's also like helping raise the profile of artists. And, we're really, part of what we did with our grants was to have people do videos. We didn't make them public at the time, but we were trying to encourage artists to realize that, you have to find a way of publicizing and promoting yourself that you're comfortable with. And that may, for some people, that doesn't necessarily mean putting your face on camera, but it can be, you can have a successful TikTok channel around just showing like a time-lapse video of your hand drawing, and drawing a piece or something over the shoulder. So there are lots of different ways to create content, but I think it's in today's world, it's super necessary to do that if you're going to sort of get recognized at all. And that's hard for artists to do. Yeah.
That's the essence of transmedia storytelling. So they can be on many different platforms with many different ways and waves of storytelling. So thinking about that business and the ability to have this existence in the Web3, I want to talk a little bit more about DAOs, because you said some things about DAOs. You've been involved in creating DAOs. And so when I think about it, I feel like that is the big next for sovereignty in emerging economies. But obviously there are challenges, particularly because we don't have an equalized playing field with access to bandwidth, to Wi-Fi, whatever, and just an understanding. So if you could just summarize what a DAO is, and then your experience with DAOs, and then where you think the future is for emerging economies.
Mm-hmm. So DAOs aren't exactly what the acronym stands for. I mean, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations, and it was set up more it was defined as a almost very technical thing where you could encode all of the business logic of an organization into programming and just have it run itself. So you could basically, almost have that's the autonomous part. Like you basically have an organization that runs itself. That's not really what it's become in terms of how people use it. It's become more of a transparent organization that exists across borders. So it's useful in organizing people around an interest. And then because it's on the blockchain and it's related to crypto, they can have an internal economy to use. So in a lot of ways, I mean, it's almost like in its current form, it's almost like student body organizations, but globally, it lets people sort of organize around something, have a budget, be able to distribute funds, and self-organize across borders. And I know some people have written about things like entire new forms of nation states being growing out of this kind of environment, which is interesting. And whether or not that happens, well, there's a lot to do to get there. But I think it is interesting in the sense of that people can organize around their interests and sort of have this way of looking at shared funds to do things with to the gain of everyone. Yeah, to the gain of the group and to the common interest of the group. So it's really fascinating from that standpoint. I worked on a few projects most recently with the Doodle Bank. So the Doodles as a project is a kind of came out of the NFT space. They've worked with Pharrell. They are acquired an animation company. So they're doing a lot of big sort of media activities, but they set aside some of their funding for something that was kind of like a DAO that they call Doodle Bank, that was aimed towards the community. And I helped advise them on, how to evolve that. Because one thing that also came out of the original thinking for DAOs is that everyone has an equal share or a sort of weighted share of vote for exactly what the funding is going to do. So it's kind of, and this is going back to maybe its technical origins, because it's like it used to be, I've got a coding project, or I've got, I want to add to this open source code project. So why don't you pay me this much, and that covers my cost for this much coding. It's very discrete and it's very easy to define. But if you want to do something with an organization that's broader, that has longer term goals and kind of far reaching, and you're talking about things like marketing, and you have all these different tracks of work, dividing it up into individual proposals that get funded and voted on isn't really effective. So I sort of advise them to move in the direction of something we've done with the DAO that I created, which was to have a committee, and the committee is actually responsible for the funding. And then people can I mean, you're basically recreating government in a sense, but you're kind of voting for this committee. But what I do think, again, going back to the strength of DAOs, is that you kind of, maybe it's not that everyone has a say in how the funding is used, but the fact that that there's such a low barrier to entry, whether it's, you participate in this community and you can, I think that's really been a strength in that, especially when you look worldwide, it's like people may not know how to, if you want to say you're somewhere and you want to write a film, you're somewhere in the middle of Greece and want to write a film, and you're thinking, well, I have to go to Hollywood to do that, or I have to, how am I going to make a feature film? With a DAO, it's sort of like you don't have that same barrier. You could say, well, if I'm really engaged and active in this community, maybe I'll learn along the way. Maybe I can, through my engagement, get sort of rise through the ranks. So maybe I can be on the council in a sense and learn from there. So it's like there's a much lower barrier to entry. Like you don't have a geographical barrier to entry, and often, with communities, it's driven by your interest, and you're willing to participate and to help out. So everything being more transparent, it's harder to gatekeep, because all these things against the culture is such that, coming from the blockchain, it's like everything's put out there. You should see exactly where budget is being allocated. Should see, even if it's not this idea that decisions are being made in public and being scrutinized in public, there's not something that happens behind closed doors, and you have no way of knowing, like, what are they doing back there? Even if you have no way of learning what happens in the boardroom. The fact that that's all in public makes it much more accessible for people to get, to learn and to grow and to develop in an organization.
Yeah, I think there's so much. And speaking of different ways of thinking about organizations, let's talk about mindset. So can you share a mindset hack? This is one that you practice, one that you know of, one that you can imagine. How do you hack your mindset?
So something I've done for a very long time, I want to say over 20 years. There's a book on creativity. So I've got parrot brain now. I'm blanking on it, even though I was just looking at it. I literally have it behind me somewhere.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the Artist's Way, which is...
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I got it.
Yep,
so this is this is not the version I've had for years, but I'm also into this thing of like getting sort of heritage versions of books that are really meaningful to you.
That looks like, yeah.
So that's a
proper tangible.
Yeah. So since reading that, I mean, it's actually full of great tips for keeping yourself inspired and fresh creatively. But one thing that I've always held on to is the idea of morning pages, and some people will call this journaling and what have you, but just writing without necessarily a specific purpose in mind, but just like, the main point is just like you set aside a time and you write whatever's on your mind and just put it down on paper until you've filled the pages. And that's been such an important part of my process, because I think it really unblocks you. I mean, personal and professionally. I think it's great for personal insights too. It really helps you break through creative blocks. It helps you sort of organize I find it essential for like how I structure my day and my thinking about my week and my priorities. So and of course, when you're thinking about creative ideas, it's a great way to sort of get them down and work through them. So yeah, that's been subscribed to that practice for over 20 years now.
Nice. I like that. That's a good one. The Artist's Way, morning pages. Great. So Kai, I know we're running short on time. I want to get you on to your next, but we got to know who you are when you're not an artist, when you're not doing all this worky building, all of that stuff. I mean, I know artists is kind of not always so serious, but I like to ask the question, are you a reader, a watcher, or a listener? And what are some of your favorite reads, watches, or listens?
Oh, that's a hard one because sort of all of the above.
All of the above. So tell us all of the above.
But I'll say what I'm watching more than anything. So who am I when I'm not an artist? I mean, now I'm sort of wholly, the center of my thinking is my daughter. So I'm a father, more beyond anything else. And what am I watching? Well, I'm watching BabbleBop, which is which is her favorite thing to watch, which is like a musical thing. But I like it because it's like everyone talks about CoComelon for kids this age, but BabbleBop we found because it was more had more of a diverse range of children that they show, so children from lots of different ethnicities. And the fact that they motion capture, so it's like singing and dancing, and the kids actually look natural and sort of. I find them sort of weird, and the animation. I find some of the other stuff is a little bit creepy, even though kids like it.
I know, right? Yeah, I have like little nieces. I'm like, why are you interested in this? Especially the ones where they watch people like stop motion toys. So I'm like, that's Peppa Pig. Like Peppa Pig is a big one where they stop motion with the toys, and I'm like, what is that? So BabbleBop, you're watching BabbleBop, okay?
But yeah, beyond that, what am I? Yeah, so I haven't had as much time to read as I'd like to. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't know if that's as exciting as I'd like it to be, but yeah, that's the reality of.
Right. Yeah. For our parent listeners, they're going to be happy for the tip for BabbleBop.
Yeah. There you go.
All right, Kai. So this has been wonderful. I'm going to pick your brain a little bit on your kids' games on another time because, that's my space as well. So before we sign off, do you have any last thoughts that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about my latest thing, which is AI.
Yes, please. If you have time, tell us. Yes, tell us a little bit at least.
Oh, I think the only takeaway is that everyone needs to be paying attention to it and learning about it in some form, because it's going to transform everything. And I think to view that in a positive light, I think there's a lot of positives coming out of it. But the kind of quick shorthand thing is you hear about people currently applying AI to things like programming, and they talk about becoming a 10x coder. I think if you want to frame it positively, it's like you could be a 10x artist or 10x creative. Like what do you do if you have a team of people that are at your disposal, and what does that enable you to do? And that's basically the direction we're moving in with AI.
Multiply all of your capacities. Yeah. Thank you for that. I love that. All right, folks. So this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, share, subscribe, give us a review. It helps folks find good content on the internet. Check out the show notes because you'll have a lot of links to Kai's works and the things he's involved with. And aside from that, bye for now.